before the garden, before the fall, before Adam and Eve took their first breath, there was something. The Bible opens with, "In the beginning God created the heavens and the earth," but it leaves out a critical curiosity. Who exactly was there when the foundations of the world were laid? In the book of Job, God asks Job, "Where were you when I laid the earth's foundation? When the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy." Job 38, 4-7. This chilling moment hints that before man, a celestial race existed, beings known as the sons of God. These sons of God weren't human. They were divine, ancient, and powerful. Long before man walked the dust of Eden, they witnessed the cosmos come to life. Stars hung in balance, planets spun into orbit, and galaxies scattered like paint across the eternal canvas. These beings, possibly the first creations after light, were watchers, craftsmen, and messengers. Not all were angels in the traditional sense. Some held roles beyond what any human could comprehend, governing stars, elements, or entire realms. Christian tradition often overlooks them, fearing the mystery may disrupt established doctrine. But clues linger not just in Genesis, but in books like Enoch, Jubilees, and Job. Were these sons of God the same entities that later mated with human women in Genesis 6? Were they loyal to the Creator, or were some the first to rebel before Satan himself? These questions tug at the roots of our understanding of creation. As we journey through this hidden narrative, we uncover that the garden was not the beginning. It was a continuation of a much older, more mysterious story. Long before man, there existed a divine assembly known as the Divine Council, a mysterious body mentioned subtly in the Scriptures. Psalm 82 opens with a cryptic statement, "God stands in the divine assembly. He judges among the gods." The Hebrew word used here for gods is Elohim, a word often associated with God himself, yet used in plural form. This raises unsettling questions. Who are these other gods standing before the Almighty? These Elohim were not equals to Yahweh, but they were spiritual beings of rank and purpose. In ancient Hebrew cosmology, the divine council functioned like a heavenly courtroom or a celestial senate. God presided as supreme judge and creator, but beneath him, these sons of God executed decrees, governed nations, and oversaw spiritual laws. Some scholars believe they were assigned to watch over regions of the earth, as hinted in Deuteronomy 32:8. When the Most High gave the nations their inheritance, he divided mankind and set up boundaries according to the number of the sons of God. Before Adam's breath filled his lungs, these beings had roles and authority. Some were cherubim, some seraphim, and others nameless, vast in form and mind. They walked the realms of creation, shaping the unseen order of the universe. They were not omniscient nor omnipotent, but ancient, intelligent, and loyal to the one who formed them. However, not all remained faithful. This chapter of pre-human history remains buried in the shadows of theology. Some of these sons would become accusers, tempters, and rebels. Others would mourn mankind's creation, while some would protect it with fierce loyalty. The divine council, once unified, would one day fracture, and that fracture would echo through Eden, the flood, and even into our world today. Among the sons of God, there existed a powerful group later known as the Watchers. These celestial beings were assigned to observe the earth, to maintain divine order, and to guide early creation toward God's will. But something shifted in them, an awakening of desire, curiosity, and rebellion. The Book of Enoch, a non-canonical yet ancient text, gives us an account lost to mainstream theology. It tells of how 200 of these watchers descended upon Mount Hermon in the days before the flood. There they made a pact, a forbidden oath to take the daughters of men as wives. These watchers were not demons. They were once glorious beings clothed in radiance, but their rebellion changed everything. They crossed a line not even Lucifer had dared to cross at that time. They corrupted creation, not just spiritually, but biologically. The offspring of these unions were the Nephilim, giants of immense size and wickedness, who devoured men and taught humanity forbidden knowledge, sorcery, warcraft, astrology, enchantments, and blood sacrifice. God saw that the corruption had reached its peak. Genesis 6:2-4 briefly describes this event, saying, "The sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they took them as wives." The Nephilim were on the earth in those days. It was a time of horror and distortion, a cosmic trespass that would change the destiny of both heaven and earth. These fallen watchers were later imprisoned, cast into the abyss, a place Enoch calls Tartarus. Yet their actions left a scar in the spiritual realm. Their story became a cautionary tale among the loyal sons of God. For the first time, divine beings had corrupted creation in open defiance, and humanity, still in its early innocence, was left to reap the consequences. Amid the chaos brought by the Watchers and their offspring, a righteous man arose, Enoch, the seventh from Adam. He was unlike any other human. While the world around him was drowning in corruption, Enoch walked with God. Not just in obedience, but in intimacy. He was chosen as a bridge between heaven and earth, a mortal man invited into the secrets of the divine. Enoch was not merely a prophet, he was a scribe, a divine recorder of mysteries. God entrusted him with knowledge hidden even from angels. According to ancient texts like the Book of Enoch and Jubilees, he was taken into the heavens, where he witnessed the workings of celestial orders, the courses of stars, and the judgment of the rebellious watchers. It was Enoch who was sent to deliver God's sentence to the fallen angels, to tell them they would not be forgiven, and that their children would be destroyed in the flood. But why Enoch? Because he represented the possibility of divine communion without corruption. He was proof that a human, though born of dust, could walk in harmony with God. His writings became the foundation of ancient wisdom, secrets passed down to Noah, and perhaps even to Abraham later on. Before the flood, when angels were still known to man, Enoch became a legend, and then, as the scriptures say, he was no more, because God took him. Enoch did not die, he ascended. This act alone suggests he had transcended mortality, becoming something more, perhaps the first human to become a celestial being. His story teaches that even in a fallen world, God raises up voices of light. While the Watchers tried to corrupt creation, Enoch was chosen to preserve truth, to bear witness, and to warn. Through him, the mystery of the sons of God began to unfold. The rise of the Nephilim marked a catastrophic turning point for the earth. These beings, born of angels and women, were not only giants in stature, but also giants in wickedness. They devoured everything in sight: animals, humans, and eventually each other. They brought war, bloodshed, and unnatural knowledge. The balance of creation was disrupted. The cries of the innocent reached the heavens, and the Most High responded with divine judgment. God's solution was drastic but necessary: the flood. It was not merely about punishing humans, but about purging the earth of the corrupted bloodlines, the unnatural offspring that threatened the future of mankind. The divine order had to be reset. The Watchers were bound in chains and cast into the abyss, awaiting final judgment. Their children, the Nephilim, were wiped out. Only Noah, a man perfect in his generations was spared. This phrase is often interpreted to mean not only moral righteousness, but also genetic purity, untainted by the hybrid blood of the Watchers. The ark was not just a vessel of survival. It was a safeguard for the uncorrupted lineage of humanity. Through Noah, the divine blueprint would continue. The flood, therefore, was both judgment and mercy, a cleansing of the world and a preservation of hope. But the spirits of the Nephilim did not die with their bodies. According to the book of Enoch, their disembodied souls became the evil spirits, roaming the earth without rest, causing strife among men. These are what many traditions later called demons, not fallen angels, but the restless remnants of the unnatural union between heaven and earth. Thus, the flood was not the end, but a reset, a chance for humanity to start anew. Yet the memory of the sons of God and their children would echo through every generation, whispering that the war between light and darkness was far from over. The Great Flood was meant to be a reset, but the mystery deepens when we find hints that the sons of God reappeared after the waters receded. Genesis 6:4 makes a cryptic statement. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward. How could they return if the flood had wiped them out? One theory suggests that not all the Watchers were imprisoned during the judgment. Perhaps some escaped, or others who had not yet transgressed chose to fall later. Another view holds that fallen angels returned after the flood to repeat their rebellion. Still others believe that human women once again became vessels, reintroducing hybrid beings into the world. Whichever theory holds, the outcome remains the same. Giants reappeared. Ancient texts, such as the Book of Jubilees and writings from early church fathers, affirm the return of giants after the flood. These beings were encountered by the Israelites during their journey to Canaan. Tribes like the Rephaim, Anakim, and Emim were described as monstrous, enormous, and terrifying. Their presence was not mythological, it was historical, documented in Scripture, and feared by warriors. Why would God allow their return? Some scholars believe it was a test of faith and obedience. When Israel approached the Promised Land and saw giants, fear gripped their hearts. Only Joshua and Caleb remembered God's power. The others wanted to return to Egypt, preferring slavery to the unknown. These post-flood Nephilim were reminders of the ancient war between heaven and earth. They also demonstrated that evil, though purged, always seeks to return. The battle between divine order and rebellion was ongoing, and the children of God would be tested again and again. Thus, the reemergence of the sons of God and their offspring reminds us, divine judgment may end a chapter, but human choices and angelic defiance can reopen doors that should remain closed. When the Israelites scouted the land of Canaan, they encountered beings that shook them to their core. These were not ordinary men. They were the sons of Enoch, a race of giants believed to be descended from the ancient Nephilim. In Numbers 13:33, the spies reported, "We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them." This wasn't exaggeration. It was terror born of witnessing something otherworldly. The Anakim were described as massive, warlike, and deeply intimidating. Their reputation was so great that their name became synonymous with fear. But who were they really? Some traditions say they were the descendants of fallen angels who, after the flood, once again infiltrated the earth. Others believe their lineage was passed through Ham's descendants, particularly through Canaan, whose descendants populated the land with hybrid bloodlines. God had promised Israel this land, but it was full of enemies that defied the natural order. The presence of giants was not just a physical threat, it was spiritual warfare. These beings represented an ancient resistance to God's kingdom being established on earth. They were remnants of a dark age, a time before the flood when the sons of God corrupted humanity. Despite the fear, two men, Joshua and Caleb, stood in faith. They saw not just the giants, but the God who was greater than them. Their boldness secured their place in history and showed that faith overcomes even the most terrifying obstacles. The conquest of Canaan wasn't just a military campaign, it was a spiritual cleansing, a battle to reclaim earth from the influence of the Watchers' legacy. In confronting the Anakim, Israel wasn't just fighting for land, they were fighting to erase the dark imprint of a forgotten rebellion. Many believe the flood wiped out all traces of the Nephilim and the rebellious angels' influence, but ancient texts like the Book of Enoch and Jubilees suggest otherwise. After the deluge, some of the Watchers, or other fallen angels, may have continued their corruption, either through lingering spirits or new acts of rebellion. These post-flood incursions were subtler, but no less dangerous. The sons of God before Adam and Eve, if they indeed existed as celestial beings assigned to the governance of creation, may not have been entirely eradicated. Some Watchers had been cast into Tartarus, as 2 Peter 2:4 states, but others possibly remained in the heavens or roamed earth in spiritual form. Restless, disembodied, yet still influential. These spirits, known as unclean spirits or demons, were believed to be the disembodied souls of the Nephilim, eternal wanderers seeking new hosts to corrupt. In this shadowy era, the divine boundaries between heaven and earth were again challenged. Mankind was rebuilding, nations were forming, and evil began to creep back in. Mysterious kings and priesthoods rose, some claiming divine right through ancestry linked to the old gods. Were these claims mythical, or did they reflect real spiritual heritage tied to the Watchers? This second infiltration wasn't just about producing giants, it was about influencing civilizations, corrupting leadership, distorting religion, and planting seeds of rebellion. From Babylon to Canaan, this dark influence shaped empires. God's answer wasn't another flood, it was a covenant. With Abraham, a new spiritual nation was born. Through Israel, God would create a pure line, protected from contamination. Yet the war between these two seeds, one divine, one corrupted, would continue. The post-flood world became a battlefield of hidden powers, all tracing back to the sons of God who dared defy the Creator. Before the foundation of the world, a divine council stood in the heavenly realms, composed of beings who were given the authority to govern the cosmos. These beings, referred to as the sons of God in several ancient texts, were not mere servants, but ruling entities. The Bible hints at this council in several places, such as in Job 1:6, where the sons of God are mentioned as presenting themselves before the Lord. The concept of a divine council is central to understanding the spiritual hierarchy before the creation of Adam and Eve. In this celestial assembly, the sons of God were tasked with overseeing the creation and the spiritual welfare of different nations and peoples. However, some scholars believe that these beings were not entirely loyal. Lucifer, once one of the highest ranking among the heavenly hosts, rebelled, and his followers, known as the fallen angels, took part in a cosmic mutiny. The question arises, who were the sons of God before Adam and Eve, and what role did they play in the spiritual governance of the earth? The ancient Hebrew word for sons of God, Bnei Elohim, is used in Genesis 6:2, where these beings are said to have taken human wives, leading to the birth of the Nephilim, the mighty men of renown. This passage has been the subject of much debate. Some interpret it literally, believing that these divine beings physically interacted with humanity. Others argue that the phrase may refer to the godly descendants of Seth, but the latter interpretation has difficulty explaining the Nephilim's unusual nature. The sons of God in the divine council had direct involvement with the shaping of creation, from establishing the laws of nature to setting the spiritual boundaries between heaven and earth. They were not neutral entities. They had free will, and with that came the ability to choose between loyalty to God and rebellion. Their fall would not only have devastating consequences for themselves, but for all of creation. The mystery of their fall lies in their decision to abandon their post and corrupt humanity. In Genesis 6:1-4, the sons of God descending to earth to interact with human women wasn't just a momentary lapse of judgment. It was a deliberate act that defied the natural order established by God. This act resulted in the birth of the Nephilim, a race of giants who embodied both the divine and the monstrous. This moment in time marked the beginning of a spiritual war, a conflict that would reverberate through history and shape the future of mankind. The story of the sons of God and their fall is one of tragedy and rebellion, set against the backdrop of a divine plan gone awry. According to ancient texts, these heavenly beings, once entrusted with immense power and authority over the earth, chose to forsake their divine roles. Instead of maintaining their distance from humanity, they descended to earth, attracted by the beauty of human women. This act was a profound breach of divine order. In Genesis 6:1-4, we learn that the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful and took wives for themselves. Their union produced the Nephilim, a race of giants who were neither fully human nor fully divine. The presence of the Nephilim on earth marked a significant moment in the history of creation. These beings, part angelic and part human, were born out of a perversion of divine will. They were mighty warriors, skilled in violence and power, but they were also a source of corruption. Their very existence brought about chaos, violence, and the deepening of humanity's sin. It is believed that their influence led to an even greater degradation of mankind, contributing to the flood that would eventually wipe out most of humanity. However, the fall of the sons of God did not go unnoticed in the heavenly realms. Their actions prompted divine intervention. God, in His wisdom, saw the threat that the Nephilim posed to both the spiritual and physical world, and as a result, He commanded the flood, an act that would cleanse the earth of the corruption brought on by the rebellious sons of God. The flood is often seen as a divine judgment on the unnatural union between these celestial beings and humans. The fate of the fallen sons of God is shrouded in mystery. In 2 Peter 2:4-5, it is written that the angels who sinned were cast into Tartarus, a dark, confined abyss, where they were held until the final judgment. The flood, however, was not the end of the story. The Nephilim and their influence lived on in the tales of giants found in later scriptures, and their legacy would continue to haunt human history, even after their physical demise. They were not just a race of beings. They were symbols of rebellion, defiance, and the profound consequences of straying from God's original design. The fall of the sons of God offers a stark reminder of the dangers of power and temptation. These beings, who were once in the presence of the Creator, chose to use their power for selfish purposes, leading to destruction. It is a tale that resonates with the Christian journey, where temptation, unchecked desires, and the fall from grace can lead to profound consequences, not just for the individual, but for all of creation. The story of their fall is a warning about the dangers of pride and disobedience, reminding us of the delicate balance between creation and Creator. The fall of the sons of God and the birth of the Nephilim left an indelible mark on the spiritual and earthly realms. Even though the flood wiped out the direct descendants of these beings, their legacy persisted in the world and the stories that followed. The influence of the Nephilim continued to reverberate throughout human history, shaping cultures, religions, and even modern-day mythology. This chapter explores the enduring legacy of these celestial beings and their hybrid offspring. The Nephilim were not just physical giants, they represented a mixing of the divine and human, which, according to biblical teachings, was against God's original design. This intermingling of the celestial and earthly realms brought about a unique, corrupted power. Even after their destruction in the flood, the idea of the Nephilim persisted in cultures around the world. From the giants of Greek mythology, such as the Titans, to the legendary figures in various mythologies, the Nephilim's influence can be traced across ancient civilizations. Their image and power lived on in the human imagination, even as their real-world existence had been wiped away by the flood. Interestingly, the Nephilim are often linked to the concept of heroes in ancient mythologies. In some traditions, the giants were seen as powerful, even benevolent, beings who served as protectors or benefactors to mankind. This reflects the ambiguity surrounding the Nephilim. While they were born of a rebellious act, their strength and abilities made them both revered and feared. In the post-flood world, stories of these mighty men of renown continued to shape the legends of heroes and warriors throughout history. The Nephilim may have been destroyed physically, but their presence lingered in the cultural collective consciousness. Moreover, in the Christian faith, the legacy of the sons of God and the Nephilim serves as a potent warning against the temptation of mixing the sacred with the profane. The act of fallen angels mating with human women represented an unnatural defiance of divine order. Their actions showed that even those closest to the Creator could fall prey to pride and rebellion. This corrupted union led to the creation of beings who were not part of God's original plan. Their existence became a symbol of what happens when humanity and divinity are forced into an unnatural relationship. As we move forward in history, the concept of Nephilim continues to captivate the imagination. Their legacy influences not only religious thought, but also modern pop culture, particularly in literature, film, and television. The Nephilim have become archetypes of forbidden power, complex beings who are both angelic and human, noble yet fallen. This powerful image speaks to our fascination with the intersection of the divine and the human, the struggle between good and evil, and the potential for corruption in even the highest beings. In Christian teachings, the Nephilim represent the dangers of straying from God's intended order. They are a warning against the allure of mixing the spiritual with the material, of losing sight of God's ultimate plan. The enduring legacy of the sons of God and their offspring reminds believers that God's creation is not to be tampered with, and that the consequences of doing so can be far-reaching and devastating.